for coming. As some of you know, the School of Public Policy and the Department of International Relations and European Studies are now involved in a major research project on global norm evolution and R2P, working in cooperation with research partners in Europe, Brazil, China, and India. The birth of R2P is a fascinating story, and there is no better person to tell this story than Gareth Evans.
Well, as we look back to not only what's been happening in recent months in Syria, but as we look back over recent decades and indeed over the whole course of human history, one of the most depressing and distressing realities we have to acknowledge has been our inability to prevent or halt the apparently endlessly recurring horror of mass atrocity crimes.
I first met Gareth Evans in the 1990s. He was one of the few foreign ministers in the world, and I met many foreign ministers in the world, who had already focused in the very difficult days when the Rwanda genocide was occurring on this crisis of mass crimes against humanity and how little was being done about them.
What's in some ways hardest of all to believe is how little changed in the decades after World War II. One might have thought that Hitler's atrocities within Germany and the states under Nazi occupation would have laid to rest once and for all the notion what happens within state borders is nobody else's business, that sovereignty is in essence a license to kill. One would have hoped that that would have gone. But even with all the developments in international human rights law, the killing still went on. The 8,000 men and boys murdered in Srebrenica, the 800,000 men, women and children murdered in Rwanda, recent months in Syria, and the Security Council failed to act. Libya especially was really a textbook example.
The very success of that doctrine in Libya led to its failure in Syria.
The core elements of the concept was in the genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity were not no one else's business, but everyone's business. And these formal statements were in themselves really rather breathtaking achievements, since what was involved here conceptually was nothing less than, as the British Holocaust historian Martin Gilbert has put it, the most significant adjustment to national sovereignty in 360 years.
Do you think there's any realistic hope of these principles being applied to allies of the most powerful state on earth, places like Uzbekistan, which is a US ally, and also one of the most brutal dictatorships that's ever existed? And if these principles cannot be applied uniformly, then what meaning do they have as anything like international law, as opposed to merely being a tool of the powerful?
R2P was not designed to be an all-purpose solution to every conceivable concern we might continue to have. You have to be very careful about, talking about R2P in this context, even though the language lends itself to that description, because otherwise you lose the capacity of R2P to be a sort of an energizing political tool to generate a response where it might otherwise be lacking.